Today we're starting Unit 2, Notes number 6, the Progressive Era. So the Progressive Era will be focusing on changes. So they will be identifying problems created by industrialization, and we'll start to see the beginnings of solutions to these problems. The four goals of progressivism. Reformers across the country organized to address the problems of industrialization. Journalists and writers expose the unsafe conditions often faced by factory workers, including women and children. Political reformers struggled to make government more responsive to the people. Together, these reform efforts formed the Progressive Movement, which aimed to restore economic opportunities and correct injustices in American life. So when we think about the progressive movement, you want to focus on the word progress. So when you are making progress, you are making improvements. And so this movement is all about trying to improve the current situation in many different factors of American society. You also want to connect the progressive movement to the word reform. And so reform means change for the better. You're not just making just changes, but change for the better. So changes in working conditions. So what changes can be made? Working less hours, better pay, changes for the better. Changes in politics to make politics less corrupt. Changes in the city that will help to make the city safer, more sanitary. So it's all about this progress to improve and then also reforming, changing for the better. So the progressive movement focused on four goals. One, protecting social welfare. Two, promoting moral improvement. Three, creating economic reform. And four, fostering efficiency. So we'll talk more about each one of these in the next few slides. Protecting social welfare and promoting moral improvement. The YMCA opened libraries, sponsored classes, and built swimming pools and handball courts. The Salvation Army fed poor people in soup kitchens and cared for children in nurseries. Florence Kelley became an advocate for improving the lives of women and children. She helped win passage of the Illinois Factory Act, which prohibited child labor. So, this is all examples of promoting social welfare. How can we help the people? In this case, the focus is on the less fortunate people, the urban poor, children, helping those that can't help themselves. So you see organizations like the YMCA and the Salvation Army kind of developing from this movement, from this progressive era. And you see a lot of people like Florence Kelley, particularly women, devoting themselves to these causes. So next, promoting moral improvement, the idea of being more moral, being a good person. So other reformers felt that morality held the key to improving the lives of poor people. Prohibition, the banning of alcohol, was one such program. Prohibitionist groups felt that alcohol was undermining American morals, that by drinking alcohol, the consumption of alcohol, it led to many problems in society, men being drunk, men beating their wives, men being hung over, not being able to work. So the source of all of these issues, people that followed prohibition felt it was alcohol. And if you could eliminate alcohol, then you can improve the morality of people. So the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the WCTU, spearheaded this crusade. The WCTU reform activities provided women with expanded public roles. And so we'll see with a lot of these different progressive movements, it gave women more opportunity to participate, speak out, advocate for certain causes, gave them that outlet. And also more participation in what was going on. Creating economic reform and fostering efficiency. So some Americans began to question the capitalist economic system because so many people are working so hard, not being able to make ends meet, and they're just seeing the growth of the wealthy. So labor leader Eugene V. Debs helped organize the American Socialist Party in 1901. He felt there was an uneven balance among big business, government, and ordinary people, feeling that government and big business had kind of more of a say in what was going on, and kind of the ordinary people were being taken advantage of, not having as much of a voice. And so, with this Socialist Party trying to advocate for more of the ordinary people, the basic workers. Journalists who wrote about the corrupt side of business and public life became known as muckrakers. So they helped to make the public aware of the corruption that was going on in government, in big corporations. And so the term muckrakers, like they're raking up all of the muck, all of the dirt, and then they are publishing their stories in magazines, newspapers, publishing the pictures that they're taking, and really pointing a light onto all these different injustices that are happening so that the American public is more aware about it and kind of forcing the government to get involved as well. Many progressive leaders put their faith in experts and scientific principles to make society and the workplace more efficient. To improve efficiency in factories, manufacturing tasks were broken up into simpler parts. This led to the concept of the assembly line, where the same task was done by a person over and over, and then they would pass it on to the next station to perform the next task. The assembly line would speed up production, but it would also require workers to work harder. So let's stop and think. How can we sum up the goals of the progressive movement? So, again, going back to that idea of progress, so that the progressive movement wanted to improve society. And so, we're looking at the different areas that they wanted to improve society, whether it was social welfare, um, moral improvement, improving economic reform and efficiency, but also reform, trying to change things for the better. They're able to identify the problems and they're trying to come up with solutions to stop the problem and then prevent the problem from happening in the future. Cleaning up local government. Cities face some of the most obvious social problems of the new industrial age. Political bosses rewarded supporters with jobs and bribes. Efforts to reform city politics stemmed in part from a desire to make government more efficient and more responsive to its constituents. So, with political machines running cities, their whole agenda and goal is to make money for themselves and not improve the problems of the cities, which is what government should be doing. They should be responsive and kind of respond to their constituents, the people that they are overseeing, and trying to make their lives better. Commissions were adopted to oversee cities with corruption, and city managers with real experience and training in public administration were appointed to run city departments. So, this change in just allowing people to pick other people, friends, whoever bribed them into having positions in the city began to change to appoint people with actual experience and training in what they knew how to do. Reform at the state level. Inspired by progressive governors, many states passed laws to regulate railroads, mines, mills, telephone companies, and other large businesses. As governor of Wisconsin, Robert Lafayette's major target was the railroad industry. He taxed railroad property at the same rate as other businesses, set up a commission to regulate rates, and forbid railroads to issue free passes to state officials. So we began to see more governors kind of taking control over their states, trying to weed out corruption and making corporations more accountable for what they're doing. Businesses often hired children because they performed unskilled jobs for lower wages. So it kind of kept kids in jobs in factories, also due to the fact that so many families needed everyone to work because they were paid so low. So they needed that extra income from their kids. However, children were more prone to accidents caused by fatigue. So they were young, they would get tired, and would have more industrial accidents at the site. Many developed serious health problems. In 1916, the Keating Owen Act was passed, and it prohibited the transportation across state lines of goods produced with child labor. So if a product was made and kids were used in the process, then it could not be shipped across state lines. So this is another act to try to limit and prohibit child labor. So here are some images of child labor. In 1908, Lewis Hines quit his teaching job to document child labor practices. So when you look at these images, he would kind of sneak into factories to capture kids. In the process, try to interview them to gain more information. If you know, so at the very top looks like it's probably a textile mill where you have looks like this is some kind of factory or thread that's being spun here. But look at that kid has no shoes. And so when we talk about injuries and safety in factories, um, at the time, people were not concerned about their workers, and those are real issues because it can mean accidents, it can mean um, dangerous situations. And so, again, this movement is all about trying to fix these problems. So Lewis Hine, his images helped to convince the public of the need for child labor regulations. So let's stop and think. What changes did reforms at the state level bring about in the progressive movement? So we began to see governors taking more of a progressive stance, kind of overseeing what was happening at the state. So if the federal government couldn't do it, governors were doing it. We also began to see cities kind of taking over, establishing commissions, hiring people with real experience and trainings, and trying to kind of root out political machines. We also see child labor laws becoming enacted and to try to prohibit child labor in general. Reforming elections. Government reforms gave Americans more of a voice in electing their legislators and creating laws. The initiative is a bill that is originated by the people rather than lawmakers. The referendum, by voting, voters either accept or reject the initiative. So the example would be propositions in elections. So right now you're probably seeing tons of commercials for Prop 22, Prop 15, Prop 19, yes or no ads. And so what happens is you may have also remember that sometimes you go to Target or the grocery store and there's people outside that want your parents to sign petitions. And so this is the initiative process. If you get enough signatures, you can put a